You're back with the lawn engineer. So there's been a lot of interest on our Simplicity lawn tractors here on how to improve the clearance on these rear deck rollers during transport. So today we're going to look at another way you could potentially increase the clearance of this mower deck in transport mode. Let's get to it. All right, in a previous video I showed how there's multiple holes on the deck here with these tension cables, and to go from the inner one to the outer one, this top one, um, and the adjustment there and how we can increase our clearance on our mower deck during the transport mode. But if we go up top here, so we're at the linkage here. This linkage is on the non-discharge side of the mower, and we can see here we've got multiple hole options here also for these tension cables on the top side. And this rod connects both sides to the transport lever. So we're going to make a change here and see how much that affects our deck lift. Okay, we're in transport mode there. We're going to measure to our rear roller here, and to the bottom of our rear roller we have about 1.25 inches. So that'll be our baseline. Okay, to start, we're going to put our mower deck down in free float to take tension off those cables. All right, we are just above the rear tire here under the lever, the deck lift lever. And what we're looking at here is the top of that tension cable that runs down to the deck. You can see there, there's an open hole here. So all we have to do is take this pin out. There's a washer there too, make things a little more difficult. Pop our cable out, move it into that other hole, and then put our cotter pin back in there. All right, now let's go do the other side. All right, we're on the opposite side here. We can see our cable right here. So we're gonna duplicate our procedure there. We're gonna pull our pin, grab our washer, move to the other hole, put our pin back in. There we go. All right, let's put it back up in transport mode, see if we made a difference. All right, let's see what we have. Well, unfortunately, we are now down to about a 1/2 inch. So what we learned today, for maximum clearance, we want these cables at the furthest hole from the pivot point. So in this case, this gives us the least movement. We want to be in this outside hole. So if you take a look at your linkage, and these are here, move them out to the outside. So I'm going to do that right now. First, we got to put this thing down into free float mode to take tension off those. All right, so we've got the tension off these cables. We put the deck in free float. We'll pull our cotter pin. We'll take our washer off. Pop our cable in the other hole here. And duplicate that on the other side. All right, what did we learn from our little experiment here? On the output side of any mechanical linkage, the closer to the pivot point you are, the less motion you're going to have. The further from that pivot point, the more motion you're going to have. So I knew going into it that was going to reduce our clearance, but it's a good experiment to always check that. So on that output side of the linkage here, where those tension cables connect, if you want more lift, go to the hole furthest from your pivot point. That will maximize your deck lift. Now the opposite is true for the input of any mechanical linkage. So you can see here is our deck lift lever, and you can see the input side of this linkage is this metal bar here. And look at, there's multiple holes on this. And for the input side of a mechanical linkage, the closer we get to the pivot point, the more motion we create. So in theory, moving this bar down to this hole should increase our deck lift. So that's the next thing we're going to try. All right, so we put the cables back where they were originally. We're going to re-verify the position of our rear roller before we move the input side of that linkage. All right, so just as before, we're back to 1.25 inch clearance between this rear roller and the driveway. Let's make the change to that input side and see if we can jack that up. All right, the first thing we have to do to move this bar to this hole closer to the pivot point is remove this bolt here on both sides to free up this. So the way this bar is bent, we cannot remove it without loosening up one side here. So we're going to take this side off here. All right, I've got the other side removed too, and you can see we've got some movement in our bar here. So now it's a matter of manipulating this thing enough to remove that. All right, everyone, I just saved you some pain. Do not do that. This bar is not the right length to utilize this lower hole. If we put this length of bar in that lower hole, our arm up here that our deck cable attaches to will interfere with the frame. So unfortunately, that one's a no-go. Don't do it. It's a trap. All right, as a recap, you want your deck lift cables, your tension cables at the furthest hole up from this pivot point on this upper linkage. All right, thanks for watching. Hopefully you learned something. Unfortunately, the linkage change on the lever side didn't work out. Don't do it. It's a waste of time, but the other one worked out. So make sure you're at the furthest hole from the pivot point on that linkage up top as I showed you, and that will maximize your deck lift. Adios.